I mean, I'll just pause it and keep it because I normally
No
count
need
to
to
10.
record now. No, pause it. It's
I
just
just
when
pause
they
it. Yeah,
start.
yeah. I just, but I always put it up so.
Afternoon's briefing on the 2025 meetings of the conferences of the parties to the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm conventions. My name is Sharon Rivera, and I am a program officer in the governance branch of the BRS Secretariat. So this afternoon's session is part of a series of webinars which are meant to acquaint you with the logistics related issues pertaining to the forthcoming meetings of the COPs that will take place from 28 April to 9 May of this year. So I will be joined today by my colleague, Maria Cristina Cardenas Fisher, who will be briefing you on updates on the high-level segment. So let's start. And as you are already aware, the next meetings of the conferences of the parties will be held on 28 April to 9 May 2025 at the Geneva International Conference Center. So the meetings will include a high-level segment in the afternoon of Wednesday, 30 April 2025, and the morning of Thursday, 1 May 2025. The 2-week period of the Triple COPs will comprise 11 days of sessions from Monday to Friday of the first week and from Sunday of the first week to Friday of the second week, with a provision for regional meetings and a joint meeting of the Bureau on Sunday, 27 April. So there are no formal sessions scheduled for the Saturday between the first and the second week. That's the 3rd of May. As with the COPs that were organized, the meetings of the COPs that were organized in 2023, the forthcoming meetings will be organized as in-person meetings without the possibility of online participation. This year's meetings of the COPs will be presided by Ms. Anita Sovinska of Poland, Mr. Hamad Shamimi of Pakistan, and Ms. Maya Bersi of Canada for the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions, respectively. The meetings will be paperless, and pre-session documents are already available on the website. We have issued actually all the working documents and almost all of the informal documents pertaining to the 3 meetings. In addition, all documents, including in-session documents, will be made available on an internet site created for the meetings. Participants are expected to bring their own laptops and other devices to access the documents, but we will be providing technical support on site. So as you can see, the registration deadlines have passed, but we are still accepting pre-registrations on up to the 20th of April. And as of then, registrations need to be done on site in the CICG, and delegates will need to expect waiting times if they are not pre-registered for the meetings. Thanks to the generous financial support of the governments of Canada, Finland, Germany, Japan, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, and Switzerland, as well as the UN Environment Programme, funding has been made available to support the participation of up to 3 delegates for states that are developing countries or countries with economies in transition and party to all 3 conventions. So on site, meeting participants may collect their security ID badges that you can access them at the registration desk upon presentation of one of the following identification documents. So you can either bring your national passports issued by a government recognized by the United Nations, a valid national ID card issued by a Schengen state, or a valid travel document recognized by the United Nations. On the matter of credentials, so as you can see on the screen, the Bureau agreed on an approach for the preparation of their respective reports on credentials. Original and copies of credentials in good order will be accepted, with the understanding that the original will be submitted as soon as possible. Regarding the submission of credentials, they are required to be issued either by the head of state or government or by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and parties may submit them to the Secretariat if possible no later than 24 hours after the opening of the meetings. So that's up to or by 10 a.m. of Tuesday, 29 April 2025. Model or template for credentials are available in all 6 UN languages on the BRS website, and you may submit advanced copies or electronic copies of your credentials by 11 April 2025 to the email address that you see on the screen, but you would have to submit the originals at the meeting venue. You see on the screen 3 guidelines for rules of conduct for meeting participants. So these guidelines have been drafted in accordance with the United Nations Zero Tolerance Policy towards any form of discrimination, harassment, including sexual harassment and abuse of authority. These guidelines are intended to provide clarity on the expected behavior of participants in the meetings, and these are in turn will help ensure that the meetings proceed in an orderly manner. The Secretariat is available in case you have any questions. And if one of you or any participant has any concern in relation to the conduct of meeting participants, please feel free to reach any member of the Secretariat. Now, moving on to the organization of work, I wish to refer to you scenario note joined Inf 1 and also joined Inf 2 on the tentative schedule and list of possible contact groups as agreed by the Bureau. So these are the main documents to refer to with regard to the organization of work for the meetings. So as indicated in information document 2, there will be pre-meetings scheduled on Sunday, the 27th of April, 2025. So we will have Bureau meetings scheduled every day in the morning, and also regional meetings after that. Internet and mobile apps will also be made available to update participants on the order of the day, as well as provide participants with copies of conference room papers. So you will see on this slide and the following slide the tentative schedule of work for the meetings. So over the course of 2 weeks, there will be separate sessions for the Stockholm Convention, the Basel Convention, and the Rotterdam Convention in that order. So during the first week, we will have joint sessions on joint issues, beginning with Monday, the 28th of April, starting with matters pertaining to the organization of work, election of officers, and credentials. We will have Stockholm Convention specific sessions starting with Monday, 28th April, and we will have BC specific sessions starting in the afternoon of Monday as well. And then on Thursday, 1 May, and Friday, the 2nd of May. There will be a day off on Saturday, the 3rd of May. So the expected working hours will be from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Contact groups are expected to meet during the day and in the evening. So as per this schedule, the item on credentials would be considered for the first time during the joint session on Monday, 28th April. So that's in the morning. And then the matter will be suspended until the joint session in the afternoon of Friday, the 2nd of May, at which time the reports by the Bureau on Credentials would be considered for adoption by the three conferences of the parties. The item would then be suspended until a joint session in the afternoon of Thursday, 8 May, during the second week, at which time consideration of the item will continue with the possible adoption of an updated report on credentials. This is the tentative schedule of work for the second week of the meetings. So during this week, we will be having Basel Convention specific sessions and Rotterdam Convention specific sessions, as well as joint sessions. So draft decisions that are convention specific would be considered by the plenary during the time frame allocated to the convention specific sessions. All decisions would be adopted pending confirmation from the contact group on budget matters that any activities contemplated by the decisions had been taken into account in the proposed programs of work and budgets for the biennium 2026-2027, or that they would have no budgetary implications. Now moving on to contact and other groups. You see on the screen a list of possible contact and other groups. Each conference of the parties could establish convention-specific contact groups that would meet during the time frame allocated to the convention-specific sessions. So if they are established during the joint sessions, convention-specific contact groups could start their work before the convention-specific sessions they relate to. There would be a limited number of contact groups running in parallel to enable small delegations to effectively participate in deliberations. So not all groups may be necessary, but they may also be constituted as friends of the president or as another smaller group. As we mentioned, the number of groups working in parallel will be limited to ensure that there is adequate opportunity for the interests of all delegations to be factored into the discussions. To ensure progress in the deliberations, smaller groups could be established for more detailed consideration. Decisions concerning the number and nature of the groups set up and the organization of their work are made by the conferences of the parties based on proposals made by the relevant president of the COP in consultation with the Bureau throughout the meetings as progress is made on each issue. Now I would like to turn to my colleague, Maria Cristina, who will be briefing you on the organization of the high-level segment.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Maria Cristina Cárdenas Fischer, and I'm a Senior Policy and Strategy Advisor in the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions. And I don't know if everyone has also lost the presentation. Thanks. I will be introducing to you a couple of slides on the organization of the high-level segment. In 2023, the conferences of the parties to the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions decided that their 2025 meetings would actually include a high-level segment of no more than 1 day's duration. This high-level segment will take place at the Geneva International Conference Center and the nearby Warenbeck Conference Center in Geneva in the afternoon of Wednesday, the 30th of April, and the morning of Thursday, 1st of May 2025, as you can see from this slide. Next slide. Thank you. The objective of the high-level segment is for ministers and deputy ministers or their equivalent to exchange experiences and to provide political leadership for renewed commitment towards the implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions. The outcomes of the high-level segment will comprise a report summarizing the discussions and a consolidation of the key messages emerging from the roundtable discussions and the interactive panel discussions that will take place. Attendance is open to all meeting participants for the opening ceremony, but the roundtables and the panel discussions are open only for ministers and deputy ministers. I mean, they're the ones that would be allowed to actively participate. The languages, during plenary sessions, there will be simultaneous interpretation into the 6 UN languages. However, for the roundtables that are organized in the Varembe Conference Center, due to logistic restrictions, there will only be there will be no available simultaneous interpretation. Sorry, I see someone is saying that they can't hear. Can you hear me now? Great, thanks. The roundtables will be organized around language preference to ensure that everyone can participate. So we're trying to group all the ministers that have registered according to their language preference. There is further information on the high-level segment that is available on our website. There is a document on the organization of the high-level segment, as well as the thought starter for the high-level segment, which contains questions that could be addressed during the ministerial discussions. Next slide, please. This slide shows the flow of the program that is envisaged for the high-level segment. It is expected that ministers would be arriving at the conference center at 2:45 because the ceremony will be starting at 3 o'clock sharp. The opening ceremony will be open to all participants in the meeting of the Conference of the Parties and will take place in the plenary hall. Opening remarks will be made by representatives of the host country and by other dignitaries based on the theme of the high-level segment. There will be an introduction of the theme by a keynote speaker to stimulate dialogue during the ministerial round tables that would follow. There's also a plan to have a photo of all the high-level participants right after the opening ceremony. Starting at 4 o'clock, from 4 o'clock to 6:30, there'll be ministerial roundtables, and this will be taking place, as I mentioned previously, across the street from the conference center at the Varembe Conference Center. For those discussions, only ministers or their equivalent will be allowed to go into the particular venue due to size restriction of the venue. There are a number of events also planned during that day, the first day of the high-level segment. There is an EMG event at lunchtime and a ministerial dinner to be hosted by the Swiss government. On the second day in the morning, there will be a ministerial breakfast hosted by the UNIP ED on the Plastic Science Sea. And at 10 o'clock in the morning, we will start with the ministerial interactive panel discussions. There will be 3 ministerial panel discussions, one after another. Each of those ministerial panel discussions will be comprised of 3 panelists and a moderator. I will describe the topics that will be addressed by those ministerial panels in a moment. The ceremony, there'll be a closing ceremony of the high-level segment, which is expected to conclude at 1 o'clock on Thursday, the 1st of May. Right after the ministerial, the high-level segment, there will be a ministerial working lunch organized by the government of Germany on the global framework on chemicals. And following that, there will be a press conference to which everyone is invited. Next slide, please. To assist the ministers and other high-level guests in engaging in the high-level segment, we have prepared a thought starter, as I mentioned before. And this thought starter is to be used also for both for the roundtable discussions and for the panel discussions on the second day. There are three main sub-themes that will be addressed: pollution, circularity, and means of implementation. During the ministerial roundtable discussions, we expect to have approximately 10 tables consisting each of 10 ministers, and they will all be taking place simultaneously. One of the participants in each of the tables will be expected to moderate the discussion, and all ministers sitting around the table will be invited to contribute to the discussions. The perspective of the discussions for the roundtable discussions would be from the national level, whereas for the interactive panel discussions on the following day, we're expecting that the discussions will be from the regional and global perspective. Next slide. Oh, and I forgot to mention before also that all those ministers and deputy ministers that have already registered to attend the high-level segment are now receiving from the Secretariat a request to indicate their preferred panel session where they would like to intervene, as well as to provide key messages to be compiled as outcomes for the high-level segment. During these COPs, we're also planning to have quite a number of visibility activities. There will be a fair that will be taking place from Wednesday, the 30th of April to the 2nd of May. And it will be the Make Visible the Invisible Fair. There will be briefings for the media, as mentioned before, as well as press conferences. And we will be having an exhibition by the lake in Geneva that will be starting on the 1st of April and will be closing on the 30th of April. Quite a number of activities are planned, so we do hope to engage with you during the COPs. Thank you. Over to you, Sharon.
Thank you very much, Maria Cristina. Before moving on, I see a couple of comments that they are unable to hear the audio, so I hope you're able to resolve it now through my colleague Philomena. In the meantime, I'd like to continue with the discussion on the side events that we will be organizing. So apart from the other events and activities that were mentioned by Maria Cristina, we also have a number of side events taking place during the COPs, and these events will be held over 90-minute slots, either during the lunch breaks and in the evenings, on major issues covered under the conventions. So these side events serve as an opportunity for parties and observers to share knowledge, build capacities, network with their counterparts, and exchange experiences in the implementation of the conventions. So for these side events, there is a possibility for online participation, either through online speakers, online attendees, or through live broadcasting, and information on these will be communicated shortly. Moving on to the topic of elections. So you see on the screen an overview of the positions in the Bureau of the three COPs and subsidiary bodies that will be taking place at the forthcoming meetings. So for the Basel Convention, there will be positions open with respect to the Bureau, the Open-Ended Working Group Bureau, the Implementation and Compliance Committee, and Enforce. For the Rotterdam Convention, there will be positions open for the COP Bureau, for membership in the Compliance Committee, and for membership in the Chemical Review Committee. And for the Stockholm Convention, there will be positions open for membership in the COP Bureau, membership in the Persistent Organic Pollutants Review Committee, and membership in the Compliance Committee. So this will be the first time that the COP of the Stockholm Convention will be electing members for the newly established Compliance Committee. On the election of officers, so during the respective meetings of the Bureau held in 2024, the Bureau received an information package on elections to take place during the 2025 meetings of the COPs and a proposal on the steps to facilitate the process for nominating candidates for elections. Following their consideration of the matter, each Bureau agreed for the Secretariat to send an invitation to parties on their behalf to submit nominations by February 1, 2025, so that parties could conduct regional consultations in advance of and during the regional preparatory meetings with a view to facilitating decision-making on elections during the 2025 meetings of the COPs. So you see on the screen the respective regional election focal points who may be contacted by parties with regard nominations. The deadline for submitting nominations that you see on the screen may have lapsed. That's 1 February 2025. Nonetheless, this date was set simply to facilitate consultations among parties within each of the regions, and also to facilitate discussions and decision-making at the meetings of the COP itself. So parties are encouraged to take into account for each candidate the time and travel needs for participation in the meetings, qualifications and supporting documents where relevant, and the working language of the respective body that they wish to be a member of. And we also wish to point out that the presence of the candidate at the COPs meetings is required for election as members of the BC and SC Bureau. On rules and requirements for elections, we wish to point you to the financial rules of the COPs, which state that no representative of any party whose contributions are in arrears for 2 or more years are eligible to become a member of the BC COP Bureau or its subsidiary bodies, a member of the Rotterdam or Stockholm Convention COP Bureau, or a member of its subsidiary bodies, with the exception provided for least developed countries, small island developing states, and parties that are respecting a schedule of payments. Further, in decisions on mainstreaming gender, the COPs recognized that efforts were still needed to ensure that women and men from all parties were equally involved in the implementation of the 3 conventions and were represented in their bodies and processes, and thus informed and participate in decision-making on gender-responsive hazardous chemicals and waste policies. Parties are thus encouraged to ensure that both female and male candidates are put forward for election as members of the Bureau, and in particular as president. So in the next slides, we will be providing you with an overview of the key items on the provisional agendas of the meetings. We did provide substantive webinars on substantive issues that would be taken up by the meetings of the COPs 2 weeks ago. So these slides are just meant to provide you with an overview of the key items under each convention. So for the Basel Convention, COP17 main issues. As you can see on the screen, there will be a discussion on the strategic framework and improving the functioning of the prior informed consent procedure under strategic issues. On scientific and technical matters, the BC COP will be taking up a number of technical guidelines, including one on POPs waste alongside the SC COP, on the classification and hazard characterization of wastes, e-notifications, further consideration of plastic waste, national reporting, a follow-up to the e-waste amendments, and on waste containing nanomaterials. The BC COP will also be taking up Basel Convention Partnership Program issues, such as that pertaining to Phase 2, to N4s, to the Household Waste Partnership and the Plastic Waste Partnership. On legal governance and enforcement matters, the BC COP will be taking up issues on the revised amendment proposals to Annex 4 by the expert working group and recommendations on Annexes 1 and 3, a revised proposal by the Russian Federation to amend paragraph 2 of Article 6 of the Convention, issues pertaining to national legislation, notifications, enforcement of the Convention, and efforts to combat illegal traffic, and developments pertaining to the Implementation Compliance Committee, as well as the work program of the open-ended working group for 2026 to 2027. For the 12th meeting of the Rotterdam Convention COP, the COP will be taking up the listing of chemicals in Annex 3 to the Convention, including the listing of 4 new chemicals. Those are chlorpyrifos, methyl bromide, mercury, and paraquat, as well as the listing of 6 returning chemicals: acetochlor, carbosulfan, chrysotyl asbestos, phention formulations, iprodion, and paraquat formulations. There will also be updates from the Compliance Committee and discussions on enhancing the effectiveness of the Rotterdam Convention, including a follow-up to decision RC 11/4, which is on enhancing the effectiveness of the convention by addressing impacts on the listing of chemicals in Annex 3 and its implementation, as well as a proposal that had been previously submitted by African countries to amend Article 16 of the Rotterdam Convention. For the 12th meeting of the Stockholm Convention COP, the main issues pertain to the listing of chemicals in Annex A, B, or C to the Convention, and for this coming meeting, the COP will be taking up the listing recommendations from POPROC pertaining to chlorpyrifos, long-chain perfluorocarboxylic acids and related compounds, and chlorinated paraffins. The COP will also be taking up a proposal from the government of Ethiopia to amend Annex 8 to the Convention to include an additional specific exemption for the use of UV328, which was for which a decision on its listing was adopted by the COP at its 11th meeting. The COP will also be taking up the issue of exemptions, and under this item, there is a request from the Republic of Korea for an extension of specific exemptions. The COP will also be taking up issues pertaining to DDT, PCB, brominated diphenyl ethers, and a report which was submitted by POPROC for consideration of the COP on persistent organic pollutants in stockpiles, products, and articles in use and in wastes. The COP will also be taking up the issue of compliance, including the election of the first set of members of the Compliance Committee and the adoption of a work plan. There will also be a report on the global monitoring plan to be taken up by the COP, and other matters pertaining to reporting, as well as the sixth review on the financial mechanism. On joint issues, as in previous COPs, the three meetings, the COPs will be taking up issues pertaining to technical assistance, regional centers, and also the resource mobilization strategy, including findings on a possible non-state actor resource mobilization strategy. The three COPs will also be taking up issues pertaining to programs of work and budgets for the next biennium, as well as issues pertaining to international cooperation and coordination, including with the Minamata Convention on Mercury and with other organizations. The COPs will also be taking up issues pertaining to cooperation and coordination among the BRS conventions, such as on issues on synergies in preventing and combating illegal trade and illegal traffic and trade, the clearinghouse mechanism for information exchange, from science to action, and on mainstreaming gender. And finally, I just wish to refer you to other forthcoming preparatory webinars that we are organizing to prepare participants for their participation in the forthcoming meetings. There will be another logistics webinar this coming Wednesday, but this time it will be delivered in Spanish, and another one taking place on the 1st of April that will be delivered in French. We will also be having a mission for permanent, briefing for permanent missions on the 10th of April, and this is being organized in cooperation with the Geneva Environment Network. And this briefing will be conducted in English. So thank you very much for listening to the presentation. I see that there are already a number of questions in the chat box. So let me just go through them, and in case you have other questions, please feel free to raise your hand using the raise hand icon that you see at the bottom of the screen, or to enter your question in the chat box. Before I go to the questions in the chat box, I see that Mr. Khalifa has raised his hand. Please, Mr. Khalifa, you have the floor.
Hello, hi. Thank you very much for your information. Just to have one question regarding the high-level meeting. You mentioned they have three subjects. So there is any specific topic on the subjects, or it will be on general? And there is any decision making or something for the high-level meeting? Thank you.
Can I request my colleague, Maria Cristina, to kindly answer the question for Mr. Khalifa?
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Mr. Khalifa, for your question. Just to let you know that the three sub-themes would be pollution, means of implementation, and circularity. You'll find that there is a thought starter that has been shared, is available for downloading in our website, and it provides a bit more of description on those three sub-themes. And the discussions will be around those three and how the conventions sort of are linked to pollution. For pollution, we'll be exploring opportunities to address pollution through the conventions. Circularity will be exploring opportunities of how to promote sustainable consumption and production through the advancement of circularity in an environmentally sound manner. And again, for means of implementation, we'll be exploring opportunities to enhance implementation of the conventions. I would just like to note that the discussions in the high-level segment are not leading to any type of negotiation. They're just exchanges of opinions and views amongst the high-level participants, the ministers and deputy ministers or their equivalent. And the outcome of the high-level segment is a non-negotiated document, which we basically comprised of the key messages that will emerge from the discussions. I hope that this answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Khalifa. I'll go through the questions that I see on the chat box. The first is from Ms. Centeno of UNIDO. So the question is on when they can get approval of registration for the high-level segment and also for the COPs. So we assume that your party registered or submitted its registration either during or after the deadline. So we have already actually issued confirmations of participation for the earlier batches of registrants. So if you had submitted your registration after the deadline, you, as a funded participant, you can expect to receive a confirmation of your registration either this or next week. We are consolidating the latest batch of registrations we had received. If you are a non-funded participant, or you had registered as a non-funded participant, we do process registrations from non-funded participants every 2 to 3 weeks. So you may also expect your to receive the confirmation of registration shortly. However, if you had submitted your registration some time ago and you haven't received anything from us, or you haven't heard anything from us, we request that you kindly get in touch with us directly and refer to us the registration that you had received. My colleague is pointing out that, well, UNIDO is an observer. I see it alongside your name. I'm not sure if that pertains to your office or if you are from a party. If you are representing UNIDO, you are and maybe you can clarify that from us. Yes, I see in a subsequent question that you are representing UNIDO, then you are an observer, and so those details that I mentioned don't refer to you because that information pertains to parties. Let me inquire with my colleague on when we had submitted confirmations of participation for observers. I'll revert to you shortly. And in the meantime, I would like to refer the question from Arathi Vinot to Maria Cristina. The question is whether the ministerial breakfast events are also open to observers. Maria Cristina, could you kindly answer that question?
Thank you, Sharon. For the high-level ministerial breakfast, which is being organized by the Secretariat of the Plastics INC, the invitations are going to be sent out directly to the high-level representatives, to the ministers. I'm not too sure that all observers will be invited, but those that are registered to attend the high-level segment would be invited to the ministerial breakfast. I would just mention that the venue is actually quite small, so there is a limit in the size of the breakfast. But we will revert back to you to see whether others, but in principle, it is for governments.
Thank you, Maria Cristina. And I think there's also another question from Carmela Centeno on, this also relates to your response, but whether there's any role expected from observers for the high-level segment.
So there are, and I see, I'll take the opportunity, if it's okay, to answer a few of those questions that are similar regarding the participation of observers. So for the high-level segment, for the roundtables, the observers some observers will be invited. IGOs have already received their invitations, and representatives from NGOs and the industry will be receiving shortly an invitation to join the roundtables as resource persons. There is an expectation that they would contribute to the discussions of the roundtables. For the IGOs, some of the IGOs are being invited, as well as some of the ministers, to chair and to moderate the roundtable discussions. As I mentioned, we expect to have about 10 roundtable discussions running in parallel, and the composition of those roundtables has not been shared with anyone yet, because we're waiting still for more ministers to register. Currently, we have 69 ministers and deputy ministers that have registered to attend the high-level segment. And once we have a closer final list, we will be distributing the composition of the tables. We will be taking into account gender balance, geographical balance, and language to ensure that everyone can participate, because as I mentioned before, there will be no interpretation for the roundtable discussions. We expect that the composition will be shared with those participating in the roundtables probably the week before the start of the COPs, so the last week of April. And just to clarify also that we are currently in the process of putting together the composition of the panels that will be taking place on Thursday morning. And as I mentioned, there will be one moderator and 3 panelists in each of those 3 panels. And so we are, if your minister is registered and is attending the high-level segment and interested in participate as a panelist, please drop us a line. We are during the day today, we have started to send out emails to all of those ministers and deputy ministers that have registered, inviting them to indicate to us what the sub-theme they have a preference for the panel discussions, so that we can start putting together a list of speakers and also put together the panel composition. There was one question also regarding the roundtable discussions on the Wednesday afternoon. They will all be expected to address the 3 sub-themes. So they will be given enough time to discuss the 3 sub-themes. All of the tables will be discussing exactly the same 3 sub-themes. I hope this answered the questions.
Thank you, Maria Cristina. I just want to clarify if the question from Ms. Burundoyal has been responded to. She's asking whether someone from the mission
Oh, yes.
accompanied. Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot to mention that
Yeah.
one. We do have some issues with the size of the venue and the number of participants that can be in the venue at the same time. So for the time being, only the ministers are being taken into account for accessing the venue for the roundtables. Should there be enough space, we would consider a +1, just one additional person, whichever person the delegation chooses that would accompany the minister or deputy minister into the roundtable discussions. But as I mentioned, the space is a bit tight, so we will only know a bit closer to the COPs whether or not there is enough space. If your delegation is interested, please send us a message indicating that your minister would require someone to accompany him or her in the roundtable discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Cristina. I see a question from the Russian Federation, from Mr. Naumkin, on when they can expect further guidance on technical and organizational matters for approved side events. So right now we're in the process of consolidating the final list of side events that will be taking place at the COPs. We received an overwhelming number of applications for side events. And so we have had to spend time discussing them with the applicants and consolidating them to fit into the schedule for the 2 weeks. So we're now in that process, and so in the next couple of weeks, you can expect to receive guidance from the Secretariat on specific organizational matters pertaining to side events, including on the logistics. So kindly wait for information from us within this or the next week. There is another question from Lynn asking how many people, this also pertains to the HLS, so how many officials from each country are in the roundtable in the HLS?
For that question, I can answer that for the high-level segment, it is expected that the parties would be nominating one high-level representative, one minister or deputy minister. So it will be the ministers or the deputy ministers or equivalent that are registered and attending the high-level segment who would be sitting around the table and taking part in the discussions of the round tables. Now, if a particular government has nominated more than one minister or deputy minister to attend the roundtable discussions, they would of course be welcome and they will be seated also in the roundtables. We would make sure that the two ministers from the same country or deputy ministers are not sitting together, but they distributed amongst the different tables to ensure that there's a bit more balance and an opportunity to discuss amongst with other ministers.
Thank you, Maria Cristina. There's a question on when or to whom each delegation can send a request to accompany the minister. Maria Cristina.
Yes, please send that request to the high level segment email, which is where the confirmation for the participation of the minister what should have been received from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And a question from Mr. Berens, whether there is already an overview of the side events available. As I mentioned, we are consolidating the list of side events taking place during the COPs, so we should be able to publish or inform the applicants on and participants on the overview of side events in the next couple of weeks. So kindly wait for further information on this this week or next week. We will be providing a copy of this presentation to the participants, and also we will be posting this on the website. So I think that was inquired by a number of participants in the chat. So you will be receiving this presentation. Are there any other questions on the presentation? So there's another question. Whether one deputy minister can be accompanied by 2 people in the HLS, if I understand the question correctly. Is that possible, Maria Cristina?
No, it's only thank you. It basically for the roundtable discussions, which is where we have an issue with the capacity of the venue, only up to one additional person would be allowed should there be space to accompany the minister or deputy minister. For the panel discussions, there is no problem because the sessions will be taking place in plenary. So there'll be plenty of space for everyone to be seated and accommodated there, as well as for the opening ceremony of the high level segment. So it's only for the roundtable discussions where we have a bit of an issue with the size and the capacity of the rooms.
There's another question, also from Mr. Namkin on the procedure for applying for side events badges. So the same procedure on registration will also apply. So you can refer to the slide pertaining to registration. And there is a link there on the registration procedure for participants to the COPs. So the information will be provided there. There's a question on whether any of the COPs discussions will be live streamed. So the answer is no. We will not be, at this time, we will not be live streaming any part of the meetings of the COPs, whether in plenary or, of course, not in the contact groups. I think the representative from Switzerland raised his hand.
Yes.
Oshane. Go ahead, Oshane.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I just have a question regarding the high-level segment, and I wanted to take the floor because it's a little bit easier than in writing. Do I understand correctly that the topic-wise, or team-wise, the difference between the roundtable and the interactive panel is the focus on either national perspective or on then for the interactive panel on global and regional perspective. This is how thematic-wise those two approach are different, and then all information for high-level representative to prepare are in the thought starter. So it we're not to expect another document where some precision on specific topics will come. It's all in a thought starter, and it's all around those two themes. And also for the second question is for the interactive panel discussions, ministers or high-level representatives will be directly contacted if they are planned to participate on one of these panels. Those are the two questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ocean, for your question. And you are correct. So the difference between the themes for the roundtable discussions and the panel discussions is none besides having the approach. So for the roundtable discussions, the discussions will be focused on the national level, and for the panel discussions, we will have a focus on the regional and global approach. For the panel discussions, once the panels are put together and the panelists have been identified, then the Secretariat would be approaching those ministers or high-level representatives that are will be sitting in the panels with a very specific questions to be addressed. But the questions are basically, very similar to what you already have in the thought starter. But we will tailor them so that the ministers that would be taking the floor as panelists in the panel discussions would feel comfortable enough in answering and addressing the questions. As you mentioned, yes, we are approaching directly all of the ministers and deputy ministers, inviting them to indicate to us their preference of a panel session, not only to be a panelist, but also should they be interested in taking the floor and contributing to the discussion from the floor in those panel discussions. And the reason why we are asking them to indicate their preference and priorities is because there isn't enough time for everyone to participate. So we want to ensure that everyone does get a bit of a chance to be visible and take the floor.
I think Oshana raised her hand again. Go ahead, Oshana.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Maria Cristina. This is very helpful. Just a follow-up question on that. Do you know approximately when those specific question will then arrive? I'm just asking because of internal deadline that we also have for preparation of the ministers. So if you have an approximate date, that would be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Well, we hope that that next week we would be able to communicate the composition of the panels so that if your ministers are interested in participating, then they can start planning and preparing their notes. I hope that works out. Great.
And Maria Cristina, there's also a question if ministers are required to make a statement, and if yes, when?
Yeah. So we don't actually expect to have statements as such during the high level segment, but the opportunities for ministers to take the floor would be during the roundtable discussions when they're meeting in the Varembe facility, and also during the panel discussions on the second day. But they would need to indicate in which panel, which of the three panels they would like to take the floor. But it's not expected to be as a specific statement or national statement.
Yes, thank you. Lindita, you have a comment, but I don't quite understand it. What about the others? What exactly do you mean?
That she can't hear. I
If
think
you
that a
can.
few are having trouble hearing. So
Okay. Okay, great. Are there any other questions from the participants? I don't see any other raised hands, and I hope I and Maria Cristina responded to all the questions in the chat. If you have further questions, please feel free to send an email to the Secretariat. And as I mentioned, we will be distributing a copy of this presentation to the participants and also posting this on the BRS website. So I wish to thank my colleague Maria Cristina and our support staff, Philomena, and all the participants for joining us in this afternoon's webinar on logistics issues pertaining to the COPs meetings. We look forward to having you in our forthcoming webinar presentations and of course seeing you at the meetings of the COPs. Have a good day, everyone, and thank you again.
thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.